Again, I give you a very warm welcome to all of you for this new edition. For me, it's going to be a pleasure to be the moderator in this seminar as a panel format. And I want to take advantage to give a warm welcome to our friends from MPA Connect of Eastern Caribbean, Bahamas, and UA territories, and to all the people from MPA Connect. Welcome and thank you for being here with us. Today we have a seminar that is going to be full of learning and is going to give us a wider look on how to implement environmental and social safeguards in the field, specifically focusing on diving, conservation diving for the Mesoamerican Reef. Some indications today, we have three panelists. Our first panelist is going to be speaking in English. So I invite you, for all of you that speak Spanish, if you can switch to the Spanish language when he begins speaking. And this way, you can listen in the language you understand, and you can mute the original audio so you can only hear the translation. So we have interpretation in both languages, and you can choose the language that you want to hear. Please put mute original audio so that you don't hear the main conversation. I will be notifying you when we are going to do these changes so that you don't miss anything of this webinar. Basic rules for this webinar. As Marvin, we encourage a space of learning and respect. Please, we ask you that you keep your microphones and cameras turned off during the webinar to avoid any disruption. We also ask you to please write your full name, the country where you are, and the organization for which you work for in the chat so that we know how much and where we are reaching. We also invite you if you, starting from right now, have any questions or any comments, you can add them on the chat of the Zoom. And we ask you that you make sure it is related to the topic being discussed. These questions will be forwarded to the speakers during the panel session and will be answered by them. In the same way, if you are listening to us in Facebook, you can also ask your questions in the comments box and we will forward them to the speakers. We have a comment that the opinions expressed are the sole responsibility of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the opinion or position of Marvin. So I am pleased to present these speakers. We are very happy to be here with them. Our first panelist is Seleem Chan. He is the Safety and Security Specialist in the Nature Conservancy project in Belize. He has a degree in environmental management from Columbia Southern University. Since 2019, Seleem has led the development of community-based sustainable mariculture industry in Belize. He has more than 18 years' experience in the management of protected areas, both terrestrial and marine, and holds previous experience with private and sector ecotourism. Seleem is passionate about community participation and all the projects related to them, and believes firmly that all human beings can coexist with nature. In his current role, he promotes a culture of safety in the TNC personnel and conservation partners in Belize and the Latin American region. He is a certified PADI dive master and EFR instructor and hopes to become a dive instructor soon. Welcome, Seleem. We also have Baruch Figueroa. Baruch is the program coordinator of the Coastal Ecosystems Program of Centro Ecológico Akumal. He is a marine biologist. From 2012, has implemented monitoring and research projects of reef communities. He is founder and coordinator of the Coral Reef Restoration Project since 2023. in which he includes the local community in a regional and international level, including the academic network, civil organizations, and authorities, implementing a strategy of reef regeneration as a solution, nature-based solution for the recovery of the reef, and is ecosystemic services. All of these projects have been supported by the Small Grants Program of MARFund, focused on the Reef Rescue Initiative. And finally, but not least important, we have Mélina Soto. She is the coordinator of Mexico for the Healthy Reefs for Healthy People initiative. She coordinates and articulates Mexican partners of the initiative, leading monitoring efforts, collaborative activities, and obtaining resources for community-led and public policy pilot projects. Mélina is a marine biologist and has a degree on marine environment scientist and a master's in ecotoxicology in UNAM. She has a vast professional trajectory in the research, monitoring, and coral reef, including work with academic institutions, conservation organizations, and government programs in Quintana Roo. She is certified in scientific diving and reef monitoring and has established a solid work network in the region. Welcome, Mélina. And as I was telling you, please take advantage of these very experienced panelists that have vast experience and knowledge in this topic. And I also invite you that if you have missed any of our previous webinars, you can visit us at our webpage. And if you have anyone that might be interested in this webinar, but couldn't be here with us, they can also find it in our webpage. So beginning straight away, I am going to give the word to Seleem. Seleem, thank you very much for being here with us. And I am going to give you a very warm welcome. And I am going to start with your presentation. Please let me know if you can see it.
Not as yet.
No. I have it here as a PDF.
There we go.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Seleem. You can begin.
Okay. I'm still seeing. There we go. All right. Thank you, Carla. Good morning, everyone. As was shared in the introduction, my name is Seleem Chan. I come to you from my home office in the small village by the name of Kamalote, near our capital city in Belize, Belmopan. So morning, if you're in my time zone, good afternoon or good evening for those of the colleagues that have joined from other parts of the world. Next slide, please. So in my position as the safety and security specialist with the Nature Conservancy, I've decided to, before I go there, I just wanted to share quickly my passion for conservation work, not only the conservation work, but as well as doing it in a safe and secure manner. So I do come from a conservation background as well. I've acted in several roles within Belize as a marine biologist, moved up, gotten opportunities to also support the work in a managerial positions. And that led me to the need for safety and security. So for this presentation, I decided to start off the presentation. It's a quick one, 6 to 7 slides. And the first one focusing on the need to ensure that the vessels we are using when engaging in scuba diving activities are worthy for such activities. So In Belize, and I am assuming as with the other, within your own countries, there is a need to ensure the vessel is registered. So ensuring that you've invested in or is renting, either it's your companies or your organization's boat, ensuring that that boat is registered with your local authority and that it is seaworthy, it has all the licenses, and it is cleared by the proper authorities before you even decide to venture out out at sea to do your scuba diving activities. Another due diligence activity that I believe needs to be done is insurance. Not all organizations, I believe, can probably afford the insurance, but this is something that is important, especially if you're working with volunteers. Insurance for the vessel is key. Um, Moving on to the other point, I think it's also important to have a seasoned captain. Now, what does that mean? When I use the term seasoned, I'm not referring to cooking here. I'm referring to someone who is has been in the working within that area, within that region, knows the waters well. Um, we are fortunate to be able to work with very knowledgeable boat captains in Belize. Majority of them come from fishing families, and they've also expressed a huge interest in conservation work as well. So whenever we are venturing out doing scuba diving activities, majority of the time, or most or all of the time, the captains that we're using are very knowledgeable captains. Moving on to the next point, the make and the model. Sorry, could you go back to the that slide, please? Yes. So quickly, the make and the model of the boat is important. At times, we're doing scuba diving activities in rough weather beyond the reef, and your vessel need to be able to handle the weathers. Number of engines is also key. If you could invest in a vessel that has twin engines, two engines or more, I think that is safer versus operating solely with one engine. Ensuring that you have safety equipment on board, life vests, you have a bilge pump. These are some basic equipment that you must have on your vessels when you're out at sea. A life ring, communication equipment, a first aid kit, likewise flares. And definitely a must, you should always ensure that you have your oxygen kit on board, and as well as a dive flag being flown, that's flying while you have divers in the water. And yes, this may seem basic, but we also need to have an anchor and an anchor line on that vessel. Next slide, please. So moving away from vessels and getting into the due diligence for divers, I think it is important that when we are venturing into scientific research, scientific diving, it is way different from recreational diving. So a recommendation is to ensure that your divers are certified. And look at if your activity is spawning aggregation monitoring, at the minimum, my recommendation would be that you have divers that are not just open water divers. You have minimum dive masters, or I would say rescue divers who have been diving for a number of years, excuse me, and have the experience and the qualifications to be able to handle themselves within the water. Also, do your due diligence with regards to medical records. As a scientific diver for the Nature Conservancy, it's a requirement that I do a physical with a medical doctor every 2 years, especially when after you've jumped the age of 40. It is required that you maintain a physical health and fitness to ensure that your body can continue to engage in such scuba diving activities. Done. It is a requirement that you're also insured. The Divers Alert Network. We should never dive if we're not done certified. I spoke of experienced divers earlier. Emergency first aid certified. So in the event there is an incident on the water and you need to administer CPR, you need to be able to have those trainings, and such trainings is that it must be renewed every 2 years. Likewise, oxygen administration. If that person needs oxygen, you as a diver should be able to know how to administer oxygen on that patient. The American Academy of Underwater Science for scientific divers. This isn't a must, but it's a recommendation that you do receive your AAUS certification. I think that is a certification that helps us as scientific divers, and one that I believe we should all work towards achieving. After we've engaged in scuba diving activity, remember, we must have a surface interval before flying. So I decided to insert this one in here. If you are engaging in scuba diving activities in another country, and then you're about to return home, remember there is that requirement for you to ensure of a minimum of 24 hours surface interval if you're doing an international flight that would exceed over 1,000 feet. Next slide, please. Okay, now getting into you have a vessel that's capable for doing the activity, for doing the dives. You also have certified divers. We must ensure that we have we have processes as to dealing with our equipment, boarding safety. It's important to have briefings. The first note speaks to boarding and safety briefings, diver securing your gear. So the body system is important. Doing checks on your gear, knowing your gear, and preparing well in advance. From the most times when I'm diving, there are times when divers would realize their O-ring isn't functioning properly when they're about to get into the water. So ensuring that you prepare, check your equipment properly, abiding by your body system, checking your weights, your air release sources, ensuring that everything is okay before you get into the water so you don't have any surprises. Final preparations and entry. Once you've accomplished all that, you then communicate with your captain, with the person on board. You're getting into the water, and ensure that you as well are familiar with the different signals as a diver. What is the signal for okay? What is the signal for not okay? Up, down, communicating with the signal from the captain. In the event something is occurring up top and he needs to alert all divers, what is the signal for him to alert divers that are below? From my experience in the field, the captain would rev his engine. We would agree on the number of times that he's revving his engine, and if we hear that, we then would end the dive and then go up safely. Next slide, please. Looking at our safety protocols during diving. So I've been diving for a number of years, and I've experienced both safe diving, and I've also experienced not so safe diving. While we've done our training, it's embedded in us the importance of the body system. But regardless of that, I still experience, and I believe there's still diving that occur where we go off Yes, we descend together, but the minute we hit the bottom, you have divers who are going off on their own, which isn't a safe practice. So ensuring that you're in at a distance away from your body, you're able to see your body in the event he or she needs your assistance is very important. Communicating underwater, again, with the different signals that I spoke of earlier, knowing the equipment, familiarizing yourself with your partner as well is also important. Controlling your ascent procedures. I've recently learned of colleagues who've been who would have to they had to seek um, assistance from the chamber because they were diving and unfortunately they were not maintaining their depth. Simple as when we are taught that when you're diving, you go deep. You would access your sites that are deeper and then you work your way up to your shallower sites. You don't do it the other way, the next way around. You don't go shallow, then go deep, and then come back shallow. It's important that you maintain not only close communication with your body, with your colleagues that you're diving with, but also with your equipment, your computer. Invest in updated equipment for your safety, um, as well as practicing emergency response protocols. In the event someone um, runs out of air, how do you handle that? If you're not diving, if there is time within your schedule that are downtime, organize dives where you could practice, where you could create certain scenarios. And if they do happen while you're diving, you're in a process or you're able to properly and effectively respond and avoid an incident. Next slide, please. Response procedures to decompression incidents. So we're diving. Diving is an extremely risky activity. How do we recognize the symptoms early if one of our colleagues is experiencing a decompression illness? Early signs, some of the signs range from joint pains, tingling, dizziness, unable to breathe properly. It is important that once you identify these symptoms, administer 100% oxygen as quick as possible, right? Document the dives, ensure you secure the equipment for your colleague, for that diver, because it's important to note how deep that person was. All that information would then need to be communicated to the officers within the recompression chamber, ensuring that you then communicate with, for example, the office on the mainland. Again, this is where an evacuation plan comes in based on the site you're diving. If you're way offshore, it's important for us here in Belize to establish relationship with Astrum helicopters. So there is a privately owned company that could get you, that injured diver, from your location to Ambergris Key within San Pedro town that is north of Belize as quick as possible, ensuring that you fly as low as possible as well with that diver to the recompression chamber. So all this is planning. It's not just about going out diving. It's a process where you think things through, you anticipate and prepare in the event of such incidents. Next slide, please. Good. So I believe this is the final slide. And I decided to include this information, especially for divers like myself. I've been diving since 2003, and at times you get comfortable. in diving. You've been doing it over and over, but it's important to maintain a culture where you keep training. Yes, as an experienced diver, you do not want to become complacent. You don't want to feel as if it's okay. I'm good. I don't need to continue to do my drills or my skills. It's important to always be aware, aware not only of oneself, but the divers that you're working with. Look at your psychological risks. Ongoing, it's important, as I shared earlier, to do training, do scenarios. Don't get complacent and say, okay, I've been diving for the past 10, 15 years, I'm good. Yes, but maintain your skills, maintain your health, ensuring that you have a culture or you establish a culture within the workplace where you're always training and always looking at equipment that will be taking your health and your safety into consideration. Next slide, and I believe that's the final one. Thank you very much. Bantiosh, Nebolol, gracias. Thank you in our native Creole language, and it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the question and answer section.
You have given us many things to think about, and I think it is very useful and very valuable for all the organizations that within their projects have in the Mesoamerican Reef that they carry out activities, diving activities, and all the considerations that you have to keep in mind to have the correct boat and the minimum protocols to address any emergencies and to carry out all of our activities in the safest way possible. Thank you so much, and I hope that everybody was taking notes because you have given us a lot of very valuable information. And now we are going to continue with, it is a pleasure for me to present our second speaker, Baruch. Something that I didn't mention in his biography is that he has been here since the beginning, even when Marfund started implementing the safeguarding process. And it is going to be very valuable to see how his experience was in implementing these safety measures in his safety measures and in all of his activities. Carla, thank you very much, and all of the Marfund team to participate in this webinar, in this very interesting and important webinar. I am going to share my screen. Please give me a moment. Okay. So I just want to thank you all for being here in this webinar. Seleem has already told us a little bit has reminded us about how diving activities are not easy. And sometimes, yes, there are, for us that we have done it for quite a while, we become very comfortable and very complacent. So it's very important to remember this. And Carla, as you mentioned, having participated since the beginning of the environmental and social safeguards for Marfund, it has opened our eyes in many ways. And thanks to this is that we have been able to implement many different protocols and plans so that we don't forget and have everything very, very clear. And I'm going to be talking to you about the implementation of Marfund's environmental and social safeguards in coral restoration activities, and a little bit about challenges and opportunities that we have experienced throughout our work. Sorry. Okay. So to begin, why implementing safeguards in coral restoration projects? So as I mentioned, we noticed quite a lot that diving activities are not immune to facing risks. And in the case of coral reef restoration, we are not immune to these risks. we have actually many risks that we can face from environmental and social. And I mentioned these two focuses because usually restoration projects have these two focuses. And these risks must be identified, evaluated, and managed in a systematic way, in a controlled way, so that they can be visualized from the beginning and, of course, try to prevent them. In this way, these risks are uh, are part of environmental or social risks. And here I'm going to talk a little bit about the possible risks that a restoration project might have. Not particularly that we have faced these risks or experienced them, but this is like a general reminder of what can happen. And in detail, we are going to talk about, for example, environmental risks, talking about undesired ecological impact. Meaning what? For example, in coral restoration, we have to think about that we are rehabilitating a system that has been altered, that is not carrying out their normal functions in the original way and has been impacted. So we need to take into account that we are modifying this environment to try to recover it or bring it back to how it was, which is mostly impossible, but we are modifying the environment. And these modifications have to be made in a way that we are not affecting other associated species to the ones that we are intervening with in the reef, and to have the as vast a knowledge of the ecological state of the sites that we work in. The fact that we are manipulating species, coral species, many times are protected by law. This manipulation has to be done in a very controlled and managed way, in the best way possible, because of course you can be introducing pathogens to the reef or propagate coral diseases with the manipulation of these organisms. Another component would be project technical failures. Thinking a little bit about what Seleem mentioned, we need to be working with boats and vessels to move from land to the restoration sites. And there is a possibility of events of like oil spills, even some ship groundings or physical damage from accidents. In restoration, we are also always handling tools and structures that we put on the reef. So we have to have a very detailed management and the correct management and handling of all of these objects so that we don't physically damage the reef, and also have be sure that our abilities and our diving qualifications are going to be enough to not damage the reef. Another risk that we face in the environmental part is climate risk. Being in the ocean repeatedly puts us in a risk of experiencing extreme events like storms and wave and surge, and we have to have this very present to be able to prevent it, but also to be able to know what to do in case that these situations arise. In the restoration projects, we're not only working with animals, we're also working with people, and there are social risks that we might face in these projects, and particularly when there's community actors, when we have contact with a very diverse range of local stakeholders, and the importance is to always have a way of reaching agreements and communications so that all of the visions and the necessities of each of the stakeholders or allies is not affected with the relationship and the project. We, of course, are not immune to occupational risks. We already know that there's risks associated to diving from the beginning in which we step on a boat until we come back to land. So it is very important to implement safeguards to prevent and know exactly how to react in case of any situation with risks by managing equipment. We have many different tools, and the activities that we're doing are a little bit more risky, as we are going to talk about a little bit further, because we are using different techniques that we're working directly on the reef. So we have to be very highly qualified, all of our staff and all of our participating allies, to be participating with protocols and following action plans that are very well coordinated and have all of the global view on how to do it and how to answer in case of any risk. And finally, there is a reputational or institutional risk. As you know, we work with species that are protected by environmental law, so we have to comply with these policies and these permits with the local authorities. In this sense, we also have to be very transparent with the activities that we do, and have a very clear mechanism to express grievances, to report any event, so that we can in some way improve or address any sort of risk or problem. And of course, when you're receiving funds for projects, you have to be very clear and transparent in how you're using these funds and how you're using them efficiently, exclusively for the activities regarding this project. And it's not harming the project in any other way. And in this sense, coming into these financial scheme programs with MARFund, is that through the implementation of the MARFund action plans for the beneficiaries of their donations, we developed all this list of protocols and plans necessary to be able to carry out, as I mentioned before, to be able to be ready for any problem that might arise, any risk that might arise environmentally or socially, and be able to manage it in the best way possible to prevent them, but also to know exactly how to respond in these situations. This, of course, takes into account mitigating risks and management of tools and materials, ensuring that there is always clear communication between all of the stakeholders. And now, particularly with this list of circumstances that might arise, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that we've had specifically within our project in the coral restoration project in SEA. Between, like, in the environmental risk component and the undesirable or unintentional ecologic impact, I can talk to you about the fact that we are restoring or rehabilitating reef sites. We are ensuring that there is more corals in the area. We're bringing more population, and this is basically like a little candy shop for the kids, in the sense of plagues, because we also have blooms of plagues that are hard to handle. But by creating these protocols and these management protocols, we can also reduce the impact of these unintentional ecological impact in the surrounding reef, so that we're not being nurseries for all of these possible plagues. Also, with coral disease propagation, we have coral managing protocols and actions to not be propagating these diseases. For example, regularly cleaning our equipment, not allowing contact with diseased species or organisms, and many other things that we can talk about later. Uh, and also, the very important to talk about the management and the control of coral stabilization materials and techniques, like, for example, cement, which is our main tool to fix corals. We have certain moments when the cement creates big clouds dispersing in the water, and this might affect corals in the nearby area. And within our protocols, we also have ways to reduce this, for example, the creation of this cloud and affecting other corals in the surrounding area. Um, and in our project that we worked together before with IMIPAS, we have access to an additive that allows the cement to fix a lot quicker and be more malleable and reduce that volatile characteristic of cement. Another risk, an environmental or climate risk, of course, relating to hurricanes and storms. And we try to mitigate their effects in our coral nurseries. In the top picture, I don't know if you can see all the coral fragments that were broken apart from hurricanes and storms. So we have protocols, systemized protocols for alert response, early alert or early response to address these effects on our coral nurseries, either to move them to safer zones, but we also work on of certifying people to train people to respond in case of hurricanes. And all of these trainings are very important in the implementation of these safeguards. And in social risks, as I mentioned before, is to always have communication as close and transparent as possible with our local stakeholders. From the beginning of our project, communication was always very clear, and we always had very, very clearly what the mission and the vision and the necessities of the project are. And this ensures that we can have continuous participation from these stakeholders. And the occupational risks regarding diving, we also have safeguards to plan in case of storms and hurricanes, and how to respond to all of this. For example, when we get caught in a current underwater and the captain is waiting for us to come up in a specific site of a nursery, to be able to organize ourselves so that the captain can always find us, even if we move around underwater caused by strong surges and storms. And of course, the adequate technical training. We are conscious that we are managing the reef directly with our hands. We know where to put our hands and how we can damage. For example, you can see the stonefish. If he sting us, it can be very, very painful. For example, the damselfish that are biting us while we are out planting. And all of this is part of in our safeguarding projects. And this is basically what I can share with all of you. We don't have a lot of time, but we can talk maybe later. And thank you so much for your participation and your attention. Thank you, Baruch. This is all very, very interesting to be able to see further from our safeguards, see how they are being implemented in the field. And as I mentioned, well, yes, you have been here with us since Marfan started with the implementation of safeguards. And we are very, very happy that you are taking all of these steps and all the results that you have obtained. And I invite all of the audience to ask questions in the chat to be able to give them to our speakers. And without any more, I want to invite Mélina. I already talked about her, and Mélina has been working with us since the beginning of the implementation of the safeguards. And without a doubt, her expertise and her experience is going to complement all of this that our previous speakers have talked about. Welcome, Mélina. Um, thank you. So, um, under this, if you can comment with us what gaps exist with all these protocols that have been mentioned when it's analyzed from a woman's perspective, I think that that vision is very important. Yes, Carla, and thank you so much for all of this. And well, it's not a secret that most of the protocols and all the safety protocols are are made or were made um, thinking about a standard male diver. And that standard diver has been a male, a white male, and a usually larger male. For example, for the decompression tables, the majority are based on military men from the United States. So it's also not a secret that all of our metabolism, our cycles, and our bodies, and how for example our our fat and our body is distributed and our organs are distributed are very different, and not considering this, for example, at least in the communication processes and protocols, might increase the risks that we face when we are diving. We also, many times when we go out to the field, we are a group of 5 or 6, 7 people, and not everybody has their own dive equipment. And many times we rent, and not always the equipment, the BCDs, for example, are adapted to all the types of bodies, and this can affect mobility and your comfort level. And when you're diving 2 or 3 types a day, this can, of course, have to do with your fatigue levels at the end of the day and increase the risk of decompression sickness or stuff like that. And we also have to take into account the dynamics of the teams and how to create those safe spaces in the decision making processes, especially under pressure. Um, and well, we all know that when we're working and going out to the field to work, we are not just going out for fun. We are going to work. And this mission that we have to accomplish, and well, many times, this mission kind of fogs our vision and or kind of limits our vision because we have this pressure to fulfill or to finish our mission, and sometimes we don't communicate properly, um, or the people don't feel the trust or the comfort to express any sort of worry previously, during, or after the dive. And well, I can tell you, we have lived it firsthand, and in each of these experiences, we have learned a lot. Unfortunately, as well, we have to say it. The discrimination and sexual assault situations. Well, this is very important to be able to stop these behaviors that many times, well, mostly our female collaborators have experienced, to be able to raise your voice and have a consequence to these actions. Because when people do not feel heard or respected, they are going to stay silent, and then of course the risk increases. So thinking about all of this and introducing and including the gender vision in these protocols doesn't mean creating more rules, but strengthening the protocols that can reflect the diversity of the teams that are working in the field. And we each time have more women working in this field. That are working in the field and diving, and sometimes we work with teams made up of mostly women, and this is something that we need to take into account. And here I make a little commercial break, but we don't know just yet, but it's why we want this to become a specific subject, to have a webinar specifically with Dr. Quetzali Hernandez, that she is in charge of the diving committee and ethics committee of the of the community of Mexican Reefs. So stay tuned for this. So yes, this question led to the invitation of this. But this is something that we sometimes leave aside. And yes, even though many projects say that they have this um, gender idea in mind, and the way you talk about how to implement all of this is very important. And yes, when I talk about creating this safe space, as I mentioned before, sometimes I've had teams of fully women. We also want to feel super women, but these safe spaces also need to be uh, might need the space to be able to talk, to actually ask for help, and be able to express that we are not all powerful, and that we can trust each other and be vulnerable with each other. Yes, it's very, very important to have this vision in mind. And it's very important because you are learning as we go. Each time we are more women working in this area. So it's very important. I would also like to ask you a little bit, adding to what Saleem and Baruch had mentioned, you as a regional context, how do you implement these plans and these protocols to the practice? Because we know that each country has their differences. And that you have been able to be part of this regional view, how do you take them into place and implement them? Yes, well, at a regional level, we have seen that the challenge is not the lack of protocols. I think we have access to many strict steps, um, like what Saleem shared with us. But as he mentioned as well, uh, making sure that it becomes a cultural part, an institutional culture, that is the biggest challenges. And for us, that we talk with many different partners and many different organizations, having this message come across to all of our partners, this is one of the biggest challenges. Because yes, of course, there are laws and all of that, but the capacities are very different, and we're working throughout the whole Mesoamerican reef. So sometimes we work with very limited resources, or we are in reefs that are very far away, more than 100 kilometers away from a next hyperbaric chamber. And for example, in Belize, you have that service of the helicopter, but in other projects, we don't have that access to those things. Or we have, for example, touristic operators or fishermen that don't have that safety perspective in mind. So here I think three elements are very important. Dan, and Dan. No, just kidding. Dan is, of course, is a non-negotiable. We need to have every person have done. Me having used it once already, I recommend it fully. It's not extremely expensive, and it must be included in the budgets for the organizations, because the clearer the guidelines and the simpler way that they can be implemented and standardized. Processes, for example, as Saleem mentioned, training and communication training, and be able to report what's happening, where we need to be more attentive, and have specific particular steps and ways to have feedback on how we are doing things. Not only to have the responsibility, not to be just one other form to fill out. Safeguards need to be tools that are going to improve the efficiency, not only just as a requirement, another piece of paperwork that adds to the workload, but to have it be implemented particularly. And yes, Mélina, I think that is one of the biggest steps, to be able to have that prevention sense, and to be able to implement, not only to have laws and rules, but also be able to implement them and train the teams to be able to implement them. Thank you so much, Mélina. I don't know if there are any more questions. Take advantage of these very experienced speakers. Mélina, I'm going to be back with you in a little bit. We're going to ask a question to Saleem. Saleem, are you around? Hello,
Yes.
hello. I would like to ask you, based on your presentation and the experience that have you shared with us, and knowing that we have different organizations here that are in their process to implement these protocols and standardize these rules and protocols, what would you recommend to an organization that is just starting to implement and standardize safety measures in diving and other water activities? What are the minimum basic things that you would recommend?
Yeah, thanks, Carla. Um, I would say start with a risk assessment. It isn't so, yes, it could you could look at it as a huge endeavor, but identify small milestones that you can accomplish. The first one is identifying what your risks are. We all know the work we're doing, the location, the country, what services we have access to. That risk assessment would create a better understanding as to what your risks are. Once you've accomplished that, it will then contribute and inform a safety culture within your organization. What is key is patience. A safety culture is not developed overnight. I have seen divers it is embedded in them to do it properly. And I have also seen divers who do not dive safely. So once we understand clearly what our risks are, we could then properly plan and execute our field activities in a safer manner.
Thank you very much. I think this is a valuable piece of information. And what you mentioned that amongst our audience today are looking to start the implementation of these safeguards and all of the things that you have shared with us and all of this knowledge is for sure very, very valuable. So we are already in the last minutes of our webinar. We are going to start closing. Thank you all for being here. Um, we are going to have a little bit more questions. Even if you have more questions in the audience, you can still add them to the chat. And I also take advantage of this space. If you can fill out the Google Forms, our feedback form in our chat, this helps us continue improving. Baruch, we said here, if you want, you can write your question in the chat. Okay. For now, we have a question from Maria del Carmen. She says, Seleem, the coordination between the captain and the divers is crucial for emergency management. Do you have, for Baruch, how would you talk about your expenses? And many things are not declarable under taxes. And Mélina, another question for you at the end. Seleem, so what about your recommendations with the communication?
Let me thank you for that comment, Maria Carmen. You're right. So whenever I'm diving, the captain is La, right? And I say that because the captain will decide if that boat is going out or not, if our diving activities will proceed or not. So the team leader and the captain definitely must maintain communication at all times in preparation before your trip, during your trip, and after. Especially if you have a large diving team and if you have divers coming from various parts of the country, you want to ensure that all your divers are at that location the day before. as we all know, the weather is usually good earlier in the morning, and if you're traveling far distance, you would want to utilize the better weather when traveling versus waiting for someone to arrive, then depart late in the day. Those are some basic, I think, activities or that could, when you communicate, could help with carrying out or making your venture, your diving activity safer.
I am going to add something. And of course, with this part, clear communication and effective communication, and do not assume. And sometimes you think that are very obvious things, and sometimes because of the type of activity that the captain is usually doing, for example, in cases that are uh, in like captains that are not focused on restoration or research diving, we need to establish the roles, the responsibilities, and kind of rules, as Seleem was mentioned, you know. Um, for example, how we rev the engine to be able to recall divers, but also tell the captain we are going to be doing this, and this is going to be our bottom time, or you can follow our bubbles, or you can stay in the surface marker buoy. Please do not come closer when we are coming up to the surface, because when the captain has tried to follow us, they're a little bit too close to us, or some captains just go away. Sometimes we come up to the surface and the boat is not there. The captain may be fishing or doing something else. So never assume that there are obvious things that don't need to be said. Always say everything. We are still learning about all of this, the good or the bad way, but we're still learning. And yes, Mélina, thank you. And of course, all of the experience has brought all the knowledge on how to carry out these activities. So our webinar time is done, and we see a lot of questions. If you want to stay a little bit longer to address these questions, and for the people that need to leave, thanks for being here with us. We are very happy to have shared this space with you, and we hope that you have taken important knowledge with you. Going back to the question that Maria del Carmen Baruch, she asks about how you report the payment of DAN insurance, because you can't report it financially. Well, so this is a little bit funny. So at least in our project, we haven't had this problem, because fortunately, the communication that we have with the donors allows us to move the funds from the tables, and be able to do these purchases. It's not something that we have integrated in our safeguards as such, because the safeguards don't have like administrative necessities in the projects. But I would like to think that if you are getting donations from a donation system, you can also have for like a counterpart. So we also take materials and cover projects necessities on our own. So on these organizational scale, we can find ways on how to demonstrate the need for these expenses and integrate them into the project. But I couldn't be able to answer this in another way because we don't include it in the safeguarding mechanism. Thank you, Baruch. In that case, for example, with our projects, as they are part of the safeguard, we accept a kind of a receipt as long as the people are insured, which is the priority. And this, of course, changes between donors. We have a question from Luis Velaco for any of the three speakers that wants to answer. As a dive instructor, a big thing is risk assessment, and any mistakes that you have made in a real life setting, how you lived it, and how you solved it later on. Okay, Melina. And yes, there are different experiences, and I think we've already gone past the time. But I'm going to talk about my personal case. I My first dive was when I was 10. Of course, I haven't dived every day since, but I have many years diving. And 2 years ago, I unfortunately had a decompression incident. And as Seleem mentioned, we always have to be very attentive to all of the different symptoms. There's many symptoms. I had quite a lot of them, and always follow your dive profile. I was following all of the dive plan. I was never close to deco. I was never under any risk scenarios. I was hydrating properly, and but as I mentioned before, and the comment with Mari Carmen is I had been a few days after my menstruation, and I was still giving milk to my baby. So after listening to a lot of Dan talks was when all of this made sense, because you then after the diving accident, and because of the big safety protocols that we were able to follow, I was very far, and I was able to get to safety. I was in Punta Allen in Siencan. I was very far from the hyperbaric chamber, and thanks to the protocols, everything worked very, very well for that evacuation. And I did all of my sessions and all of that. And you always start thinking, and how come I did everything right and everything I was supposed to do? Why did it happen to me? If everybody else is perfect and I wasn't tired, I was hydrating. Uh, until being able to see different Dan talks. I'm not doing a commercial break for them. I don't have any affiliation with them, but they do solve everything. I did not have to pay a single thing, anything from my pocket, and that's when I understood the risk factor that had taken me to this place. So always have a very open mind and document very, very well, and be learning always new things. Thank you, Mélina, for sharing your experience and how this adds to your first question that we discussed, how we have these protocols and these measurements leave to the side, for example, women's cycles, if you're lactating, or anything that might affect our diving. Thank you for sharing, Mélina. Uh, Continuing with this discussion, and already to close, this is a perceptive question. If any of our panelists wants to answer, uh, related to diving safety. Sorry, that was very quick. Um, I imagine that in this aspect, more on a personal level, on when you know you're going to be carrying out diving activities, it's very important to be protected and to be insured, and to know that we have all of many chances to have any incidents. And for example, as Mélina mentioned, and as she shared, I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about safety. Miguel Huerta also mentions and has left a link for us, and he is supporting with Kobe the development of for safety diving protocols, and aims to add free diving and hookah as well. and he's sharing the document and is open to contributions from the panelists. Thank you to everyone and all of our panelists. See if you have any protocol to begin with, or any diving medical experience. Baruch? Yes. So for us in our restoration project, we do like a survey for all of the people that want to join us in the project. And within the survey, we ask about their health. It's developed in a way, it's very simple questions, and it's developed in a way that if any, it's kind of like when you go to the dive center that you have to put no, 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 no. It is the same as that. And if we have a yes, we start looking deeper into this. We had to, for example, stop the participation of people with had an excess risk in their physical health, because it's a very risky and demanding activity, because we are doing a lot of physical work underwater. Many times, of course, you have to reduce the participation of those that might be more risk prone. And in this way, we start filtering the people that can work with us and reduce the amount of risk probability. But of course, even when things are fine, when we look at healthy people, we also have to promote the fact that they continue working out, that they are healthy, at least that they are keeping a good health during all of these activities. So, of course, don't drink alcohol before participating, have a good night's sleep, and as well as like the other panelists have mentioned that they do. And this doesn't eliminate risk, but it certainly reduces them. And of course, continue receiving training, and not be compliant, and not stop becoming better. And always be aware and reactivate our insurances and reactivate our courses and training, so that we can respond to emergencies in the best way possible. Thank you, Baruch. And I would like to add something else. Sorry, Seleem. Um, so in these forms, in these questionnaires that we share for your participation, is it's very important to add mental health, and not that if we're gonna not allow you to participate if you say yes, but it's very important that we know um, we have physical activity, and this can increase the risk of stress and your stamina, and we are under pressure. So it is very important to know if the person is taking antidepressant medicine, and if there's any sort of like event, know how to handle it, like a anxiety attack or anything like that. Everything is magnified underwater, so to know how to address these situations. Yes, yes, Mélina, we of course have to keep that in mind. I forgot to mention it as well. Thank you, Mélina. Seleem, I don't know if you want to add something. I saw that you raised your hand.
Yes, thanks, Carla.
Um,
I just want to quickly reiterate a comment made by Baruch, that with all the planning that we do, that doesn't mean that an incident will not occur. Incidents will occur because we are engaging in high risk activities. It is important that we plan properly when these incidents occur, that we can react in a quick and an effective manner. So it is always important, even if we have near misses, meaning that an incident almost occur, that we go back, we debrief, we understand why we had a near miss, we document the near miss, and we learn from it so that it doesn't happen again.
Yes, Seleem, I think this is a very important point, and a point to conclude the seminar. It is a very important and powerful message what you're telling us, that it is always being prepared and knowing how to act. Sometimes we don't really know when this is going to happen, and we're not going to be able to avoid that this happen, but it's very important to know how we will act when this happens and how to mitigate the risks and know very well what we're going to do. So I want to thank Mélina, Seleem, and Baruch for this seminar, for sharing your experience and all of your knowledge with us. And hopefully based on this, we can have a bigger interest in all of these topics. And I'm talking on behalf of many of us. So thank you very much for sharing all of your experience, and thank you for your interest in this topic. And if you want to share the seminar with other people, it's going to be available in our website. And we hope that all of this information continues to spread through the network. And we remind you again, if you can complete our feedback form. And we wish you a happy weekend. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you, Seleem, Mélina, and